Get this kid out of my courtroom now. Judge Crenshaw's gavel slammed down, pointing at 9-year-old Malik Thompson like a weapon. The packed gallery exploded in laughter. Look at this little boy playing lawyer, a woman sneered. Absolutely pathetic. The bailiff stomped toward Malik, his heavy boots echoing. Move it, kid. You're embarrassing yourself. Malik's mother, Sarah, lunged forward, tears streaming down her face. Please, he's just trying to help. Silence, Crenshaw roared. I will not allow this circus in my courtroom. Remove this child before I cite you both for contempt. The crowd jeered louder. Camera phones appeared. Someone started a slow clap, mocking the small boy in his oversized suit. Malik stood perfectly still. Then he opened his mouth. Your Honor, I invoke Federal Rule 17. Dead silence. The judge's face went white. The lawyers froze. The gallery stopped laughing, because what happened next didn't just shock that courtroom. It exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. To understand how a 9-year-old boy ended up facing down the most powerful people in Montgomery County, we need to go back 3 weeks earlier. The Riverside apartment stood like a monument to neglect. Peeling paint hung from the walls like dead skin. Black mold crept up the corners of every room, spreading its toxic fingers across children's bedrooms. The heating system had been broken for 6 months, leaving families to huddle under blankets during bitter winter nights. Pipes leaked brown water that stained everything it touched. In apartment 4B, Malik Thompson sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by towers of law books that reached nearly to the ceiling. At 9 years old, he had already read more legal text than most first-year law students. His photographic memory absorbed every word, every precedent, every loophole like a sponge soaking up water. The books weren't his. Malik had discovered them in a dumpster behind the county law library 3 years ago, rescued from disposal when the library updated their collection. While other kids his age collected Pokemon cards, Malik collected legal knowledge. He had taught himself to read at age 3, devouring everything from medical journals to constitutional amendments. Malik, baby, come eat dinner, his mother Sarah called from the tiny kitchen. But Malik was deep in a case study about tenant rights, his finger tracing lines of legal text by the dim light of their single working lamp. A chess set sat nearby. Malik played against himself when he needed to think through complex problems. The walls of their apartment were covered with handwritten notes, legal concepts mapped out in a 9-year-old's careful handwriting. Sarah Thompson worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. She cleaned office buildings at 4 in the morning, stocked shelves at a grocery store during the day, and delivered food for a restaurant chain until midnight. At 28, exhaustion had carved permanent lines around her eyes, but she never complained. Everything she did was for Malik, to give him chances she'd never had. She had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until she aged out at 18 with nothing but determination and love for the brilliant son she was raising alone. Sarah recognized Malik's gift early. By age 5, he was correcting adults' grammar and solving math problems meant for high schoolers. Their landlord was Preston Blackwell, a man who owned over 200 properties across the city and had turned human misery into a profitable art form. Blackwell drove a different luxury car each day of the week and lived in a mansion with more bathrooms than most families had rooms. He had perfected a simple but devastating business model. Buy cheap apartments in poor neighborhoods, do zero maintenance, then blame tenants for the inevitable damage. When pipes burst from age and neglect, Blackwell sued families for flooding the property. When walls cracked from poor construction, he claimed tenants had destroyed the structure. When mold spread because of broken ventilation, he accused residents of creating unsanitary conditions. The lawsuits always demanded tens of thousands in damages that working families could never pay. The system worked because people like Sarah couldn't fight back. They had no money for lawyers, no understanding of complex legal procedures, and no time to navigate the courts while working multiple jobs just to put food on the table. Most families simply moved out when threatened, abandoning their security deposits and accepting destroyed credit scores as the price of escape. Judge Harold Crenshaw had overseen Montgomery County Housing Court for 30 years. In that time, he had never ruled against a major landlord, not once. His decisions were so predictable that lawyers called cases in his courtroom Crenshaw specials, guaranteed wins for property owners, guaranteed losses for tenants. What nobody knew was that Crenshaw belonged to the same country club as Blackwell, where the judge's membership fees were mysteriously paid by a landlord's advocacy group. They played golf together twice a week and attended the same charity galas where they complained about entitled tenants who expected heat and clean water. But Blackwell had made one crucial mistake. In all his years of exploiting families, he had never encountered anyone like Malik Thompson. 3 weeks ago, Sarah had done everything right. She had reported the broken heater and spreading mold to the city health department, documenting everything with photographs and written complaints. She believed the system would protect them if she followed all the rules. Instead, she received an eviction notice claiming $50,000 in property damage. The lawsuit included photos of water damage, structural problems, and health hazards, all problems that existed long before Sarah and Malik had moved in. "They're saying we destroyed the apartment, Malik," Sarah had explained that night, her voice breaking as she showed him the legal papers. "They have pictures of all this damage. But that damage was already there when we moved in 2 years ago." Malik looked up from his law books, his young mind already connecting dots that experienced lawyers might miss. "Mama, do you still have those photos you took when we first moved in?" "Yes, baby. But what good will they do? We can't afford a lawyer, and even if we could, who would believe us over them?" Malik's eyes lit up with something between determination and fury. "We don't need to hire a lawyer, Mama. We just need to become one." That night, while Sarah slept, Malik began the most important research of his life. He studied property law, tenant rights, and civil procedure until his eyes burned. He memorized federal regulations and state statutes, cross-referencing cases and building arguments in his head. Most importantly, he discovered something buried deep in federal law called next friend representation, a legal provision that would change everything. The eviction notice arrived at 6 in the morning, delivered by a process server who pounded on their door like police conducting a raid. Malik watched through the peephole as his mother signed for the papers with shaking hands, her face draining of color as she read the devastating contents. $50,000, Sarah whispered, sinking into their only kitchen chair. "They're claiming we caused $50,000 in damage. The lawsuit detailed every crack in the walls, every water stain on the ceiling, every patch of mold creeping through their bathroom. The photographs made their home look like a disaster zone. What the papers didn't mention was that every single problem had existed long before the Thompson family had moved in." Malik studied the legal documents with the intensity of a detective examining crime scene evidence. The language was designed to intimidate, filled with phrases like willful destruction of property and gross negligence resulting in structural damage. But beneath the legal jargon, Malik saw something else, a pattern. "Mama, look at these photos," he said, spreading the pictures across their small table. "See the water damage in the bathroom? That brown stain was there when we moved in. You took a picture of it on our first day, remember?" Sarah nodded, but her eyes were distant with worry. "Baby, it doesn't matter what we remember. They have lawyers, they have money, they have the judge on their side. What do we have?" Over the next week, Sarah's world began to crumble piece by piece. She called every legal aid office in the city, only to be told their waiting list was 6 months long. She visited free legal clinics that were closed due to budget cuts. She tried to borrow money from friends who were just as broke as she was. The stress was eating her alive. She stopped eating properly, surviving on coffee and crackers while making sure Malik had enough food. She picked up extra shifts at work, coming home at 1 in the morning only to lie awake worrying until dawn. "Baby, maybe we should just take their settlement offer," she said one night, holding a new letter from Blackwell's lawyers. "They're saying if we move out immediately and don't fight the eviction, they won't pursue the $50,000. Malik looked up from his research, his young face serious beyond his years. "Mama, if you sign that, you're admitting guilt. It'll destroy your credit forever. You'll never be able to rent another apartment, get a car loan, or even open a bank account. But if we fight and lose, we'll owe $50,000 we don't have. They could garnish my wages for the rest of my life." That's when Malik discovered the true scope of what they were facing. He spent hours at the public library, using their computers to research Judge Crenshaw's case history. What he found made his stomach turn. In the past 5 years, Judge Crenshaw had overseen 847 housing cases. He had ruled in favor of landlords 832 times. That was a 98.3% success rate for property owners, a statistical impossibility unless the game was rigged from the start. Malik dug deeper, cross-referencing public records and court documents. He discovered that Crenshaw belonged to the exclusive Pinehurst Country Club, where membership cost more than most families made in a year. The membership rolls were public record, and Malik's sharp eyes caught something that made his blood run cold. Judge Crenshaw's club dues were being paid by the Montgomery County Landlords Association, the same organization that Preston Blackwell chaired. The corruption went deeper than Malik had imagined. This wasn't just about one crooked landlord or one biased judge. This was a system designed to transfer wealth from poor families to rich property owners, with the courts serving as the engine of legal theft. But the real stakes were even higher than money. If they lost this case, Sarah would face bankruptcy. Her wages would be garnished, her credit destroyed, her ability to provide for Malik eliminated. And there was something else, something Sarah hadn't told her son. Social services had already called twice, asking questions about their living conditions. If they were evicted and couldn't find new housing, if Sarah's financial situation collapsed completely, Malik could be taken away and placed in foster care. The thought of losing her brilliant, beautiful boy was more terrifying than any lawsuit. Sarah had grown up in the system, passed from home to home like an unwanted package. She knew what that life could do to a child, even one as special as Malik. Meanwhile, Preston Blackwell was escalating his intimidation campaign. He started showing up at Sarah's workplaces, having quiet conversations with her managers about problem tenants and legal troubles. Within a week, Sarah lost her evening delivery job. Her supervisor claimed it was about insurance liability, but Sarah knew the truth. "I'll make sure you never rent anywhere in this city again," Blackwell had told her during one of his surprise visits. "I know every landlord, every property manager, every housing authority official. Cross me, and you'll be living in your car." But Blackwell had underestimated the Thompson family. While he was busy flexing his power and connections, Malik was quietly building something more dangerous than money or influence: knowledge. Night after night, Malik studied property law, tenant rights, and civil procedure. He memorized federal regulations and state statutes, learning the legal system better than lawyers who had practiced for decades. He discovered patterns of code violations across all of Blackwell's properties, documented complaints that had been ignored, and most importantly, he found the legal weapon that would change everything. Deep in the federal housing regulations, Malik discovered the implied warranty of habitability, a law that required landlords to maintain safe, livable conditions. Any violation of this warranty could not only void a tenant's obligation to pay rent, but could actually make the landlord liable for damages. Sarah found her son at 3 in the morning, surrounded by legal books and handwritten notes, his eyes red from reading by lamplight. "Malik, baby, you need to sleep. You're just a little boy. This isn't your fight." Malik looked up at his mother, and for a moment, Sarah saw not her 9-year-old child, but the man he would become: brilliant, determined, and absolutely unbreakable. "Mama, when they come for your family, it becomes everybody's fight, and I think I found a way to win." The call came at 2 in the morning. Sarah collapsed at work, her body finally surrendering to weeks of stress, exhaustion, and barely eating. Her manager found her unconscious in the office building's break room, surrounded by cleaning supplies and the legal papers she'd been studying during her brief break. Malik sat in the hospital waiting room, his small legs dangling from the plastic chair, watching his mother sleep through the glass window. The doctors said it was severe dehydration and exhaustion, but Malik knew the truth. The system was literally killing his mother, one sleepless night at a time. "She needs rest, proper nutrition, and a lot less stress," the doctor explained to Malik, as if he were an adult. "Can someone at home help reduce her workload?" Malik nodded solemnly, though he was thinking something the doctor could never imagine. His mother wouldn't get rest until this fight was over, and the only way to end it was to win it. That night, sitting beside Sarah's hospital bed, Malik made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't watch the system destroy his mother while he sat on the sidelines. If the adults wouldn't fight for justice, then he would have to become the adult the situation required. The next morning, Malik walked into the Montgomery County Clerk's office carrying his worn briefcase and a folder thick with legal documents. The morning rush hadn't started yet, and the office was quiet except for the clicking of keyboards and the hum of fluorescent lights. Behind the counter sat Mrs. Patterson, a woman who had worked in the clerk's office for 23 years and had seen every type of legal filing imaginable. She looked up as Malik approached, her eyebrows raising at the sight of a child in an oversized suit. "Can I help you, honey? Are you looking for your parents?" "No, ma'am," Malik said, his voice steady and professional. "I'm here to file a pro se motion for next friend representation in the case of Thompson versus Blackwell Properties." Mrs. Patterson blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Malik placed his documents on the counter with practiced precision. "I'm filing to represent my mother, Sarah Thompson, as next friend under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 17. All the paperwork is complete, including the emergency circumstances affidavit and supporting documentation." Mrs. Patterson stared at the documents, then at Malik, then back at the documents. In her 23 years behind this counter, she had never encountered anything like this. "Sweetheart, I don't think children can file legal motions. You need to have your parents—" "Ma'am," Malik interrupted politely but firmly, "with respect, could you please show me the specific statute or rule that establishes an age requirement for next friend representation in emergency proceedings?" Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She had no idea if such a rule existed. Malik continued, his voice gaining confidence. Federal Rule 17C states that a person who lacks the capacity to sue may sue by a next friend. My mother is currently hospitalized due to stress-related illness directly caused by this litigation, temporarily incapacitating her ability to represent herself. As her son, and the person most affected by the outcome, I qualify as next friend under emergency circumstances. The clerk's office had gone quiet. Other employees were turning to listen to this extraordinary conversation between a 9-year-old boy and a veteran clerk who was clearly out of her depth. I need to check with my supervisor," Mrs. Patterson stammered. "That's perfectly appropriate," Malik replied. "However, I should mention that refusing to accept a properly filed motion based solely on the age of the filing party without specific legal justification could constitute discrimination under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. I'm prepared to file a federal civil rights lawsuit if this motion is rejected without proper legal grounds." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. This child was speaking legal language she barely understood, and doing it with the confidence of an experienced attorney. More importantly, he sounded like he knew exactly what he was talking about. 20 minutes later, after hushed conversations with supervisors and frantic calls to the county legal department, Mrs. Patterson returned to the counter with an official stamp. "Your motion has been accepted," she said, stamping Malik's documents with obvious reluctance. "Court date is set for next Friday at 9 a.m. in Judge Crenshaw's courtroom." Malik smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your professionalism in handling this unusual situation." As word spread through the courthouse, something unexpected began to happen. Other tenants in Blackwell's properties started reaching out to the Thompson family. They had heard about the kid lawyer who was taking on the system, and they wanted to help. Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 2 Amperes brought photographs of the broken stairs that had never been repaired. Mr. Washington from Building C provided documentation of repeated requests for heat that had been ignored for months. Slowly, Malik assembled an army of evidence from families who had been suffering in silence. Preston Blackwell responded to this grassroots organizing by hiring the most expensive law firm in the city. Morrison, Sterling, and Associates charged $800 an hour and had never lost a housing case. Their lead attorney, Richard Sterling, had a reputation for destroying opposing parties so thoroughly that most people settled rather than face him in court. Sterling immediately filed motions to dismiss Malik's representation, claiming that allowing a child to practice law would make a mockery of the judicial system. But Malik was ready for this attack. He had researched every precedent, every rule, every possible objection. The personal cost of this decision was becoming clear. Malik missed school for days at a time, spending his hours in the law library instead of the playground. Sarah worried constantly about the pressure on her young son, watching him carry legal briefs instead of toys, memorizing court procedures instead of playing games. "Malik, baby, I'm scared about what this is doing to you," Sarah said one evening as they reviewed documents together. You're just 9 years old. You should be thinking about baseball and video games, not lawsuits and legal strategy. Malik looked up from the property inspection reports he was analyzing, his young face serious but determined. Mama, I've been reading law since I was 6 years old. Most kids my age can't even read at their grade level, but I'm reading federal statutes and understanding constitutional principles. This isn't happening to me. This is what I was born for. The community support continued to grow. Neighbors who had never spoken to each other began sharing stories of Blackwell's abuse. The local newspaper picked up the story, and suddenly the little lawyer was becoming a symbol of resistance against systemic injustice. But Malik knew that community support and media attention wouldn't be enough. He needed something bigger, something that would force the system to treat him as a legitimate threat rather than a curiosity. That's when he made his most dangerous discovery. Late one night in the law library, cross-referencing judicial ethics rules and financial disclosure requirements, Malik found the smoking gun that would change everything. He discovered that judges were required to recuse themselves from cases where they had financial conflicts of interest. Judge Crenshaw had never disclosed his country club membership or the fact that his dues were being paid by the Landlords Association. This wasn't just bias, it was a violation of judicial ethics that could invalidate every decision he had made in housing court. Malik stared at the documents in front of him, his heart pounding with the weight of what he had discovered. He held in his hands the power to bring down not just Preston Blackwell, but the entire corrupt system that had been stealing from families for decades. The next morning, Malik sat at their kitchen table, legal documents spread across every surface, preparing for the most important battle of his young life. "Tomorrow, we go to war, Mama," he said quietly, "and tomorrow, we show them what justice really looks like." 3 days before the trial, at 2 in the morning, Malik made the discovery that would change everything. The law library was officially closed, but the night security guard had taken pity on the young boy who spent more time reading legal texts than playing outside. Malik was deep in property inspection reports when his finger stopped on a document that made his blood freeze. It was an official city inspection of their apartment building, dated 3 months before his family had moved in. The report detailed every problem Blackwell was blaming on his mother: water damage, structural cracks, spreading mold, broken heating. He knew, Malik whispered to the empty library. He knew about everything. This wasn't just evidence, it was proof of criminal fraud. Blackwell had knowingly rented apartments with dangerous conditions, then sued tenants for damages he knew they hadn't caused. Malik's photographic memory kicked into overdrive as he cross-referenced dates with other documents. He pulled out city records, health department complaints, housing authority reports, spreading them across library tables like puzzle pieces. The pattern that emerged was breathtaking in its cruelty. Blackwell had perfected systematic exploitation across all 200 properties. He would purchase rundown buildings, document existing damage through official inspections, then hide these reports from tenants. When families moved in and reported problems, he would sue them using their own complaints as evidence, claiming they had caused pre-existing damage. The lawsuits served multiple purposes. Families would flee rather than fight, and Blackwell would collect insurance money for tenant damage. He would then re-rent the same apartments to new victims, repeating the cycle endlessly. Hundreds of families had been destroyed by this machine of legal theft. But what Malik found next was even worse. Buried in financial disclosure documents, Malik discovered something that made his hands shake. Judge Crenshaw owned stock in Blackwell's company. Judicial ethics rules were crystal clear. Judges must recuse themselves from cases where they have financial interests. Crenshaw had direct financial incentive to rule for Blackwell because every successful lawsuit increased his investment value. This wasn't just bias. This was a criminal conspiracy to deny constitutional due process. Malik stared at the stock ownership documents, processing the implications. This evidence could destroy both men, but it was incredibly dangerous. These were powerful opponents with everything to lose. Revealing this truth meant declaring war on the entire system. There would be no going back, no quiet settlements. He would be betting everything on his ability to outmaneuver enemies who had played this game for decades. But as Malik looked at the evidence, he thought about all the families who had suffered in silence. Children separated from parents, elderly people dying homeless, working families, losing everything to this legal theft machine. The choice was clear. This case wasn't about one family anymore. It was about stopping systematic destruction of lives. Malik began photographing every document, burning details into his memory. As dawn broke, he packed his briefcase and headed home, carrying the most dangerous secret in Montgomery County. In 2 days, he would detonate this truth like a bomb that would destroy everything Blackwell and Crenshaw had built. The morning of the trial arrived with the weight of destiny. Outside the Montgomery County Courthouse, news vans lined the street as reporters set up cameras and interviewed early arrivals. Word had spread about the boy genius lawyer, and what should have been a routine housing case had become a media circus. Inside courtroom 3B, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The gallery was packed beyond capacity, with standing room only for spectators who had come to witness this unprecedented legal battle. On one side sat Preston Blackwell with his army of 5 lawyers from Morrison, Sterling, and Associates, their designer suits and Italian leather briefcases radiating expensive authority. At the defendant's table sat Malik Thompson, 9 years old, in his oversized thrift store suit, clutching his worn briefcase like a shield. Beside him, his mother Sarah gripped his hand, her eyes red from sleepless nights of worry. Judge Crenshaw entered the courtroom with theatrical authority, his black robes billowing as he surveyed the packed gallery. His eyes lingered on the news cameras with obvious irritation before settling on Malik with undisguised contempt. "This is highly irregular," Crenshaw announced before anyone could speak. "Children do not practice law in my courtroom. This circus ends now." Richard Sterling, Blackwell's lead attorney, rose with predatory confidence. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss this entire proceeding. Allowing a child to play lawyer makes a mockery of our judicial system. This is a serious court of law, not a school play." The gallery erupted in murmurs and nervous laughter. Someone in the back shouted, "Send the kid home with his toys." But Malik stood slowly, his young voice cutting through the noise with surprising authority. "Your Honor, I appear here as next friend under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 17C. My standing has been properly established through emergency circumstances documentation, which was accepted by the clerk's office after thorough legal review." Judge Crenshaw's eyebrows shot up. Whatever he had expected from this child, it wasn't a precise citation of federal civil procedure rules. Sterling laughed condescendingly. "Your Honor, we're indulging a child's fantasy. This boy has no legal training, no bar admission, no understanding of complex property law." Malik opened his briefcase with deliberate precision. "Mr. Sterling, are you familiar with the precedent established in Williams versus Montgomery County, where the Fourth Circuit ruled that next friend representation requires only competent advocacy, not formal legal credentials?" Sterling's confident smile faltered. He had no idea what case Malik was referencing, and the precision of the citation suggested the boy wasn't bluffing. "Furthermore," Malik continued, "I move that all evidence presented today be entered under oath, with perjury penalties fully applicable to all testimony and documentation." This seemingly innocent request sent a ripple of unease through Blackwell's legal team. By requesting everything be under oath, Malik was forcing them to commit legally to statements they might later want to modify. Judge Crenshaw was caught between his bias and the growing realization that this child was demonstrating genuine legal competence. "Very well. We'll proceed, but I warn you, young man, that this court has no patience for games or grandstanding." Malik nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor. Truth doesn't require games, only accuracy." Sterling launched into his opening argument, painting Sarah Thompson as a destructive tenant who had willfully damaged Blackwell's property. He presented photographs of water damage, cracked walls, and spreading mold, his voice rising with manufactured outrage. "Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is overwhelming. Mrs. Thompson and her son have systematically destroyed this apartment, causing $50,000 in damages through negligence and vandalism." When Sterling finished, Malik rose for his response. The courtroom fell silent. Hundreds of eyes focused on the small figure who seemed dwarfed by the enormous legal system surrounding him. "Your Honor, Mr." Sterling's presentation raises an important question about timeline and causation. Malik opened his briefcase and removed a stack of photographs. "These images were taken by my mother on the day we moved into the apartment 2 years ago. He approached the evidence table with careful formality. "You'll notice that every single problem, Mr. Sterling attributed to our family, the water damage, the structural cracks, the mold growth, already existed when we took possession of the apartment." The gallery stirred as Malik displayed time-stamp photographs showing identical damage from 2 years earlier. Blackwell's lawyers exchanged worried glances, clearly unprepared for this level of documentation. "Furthermore," Malik continued, "these problems were reported to the appropriate city agencies within our first week of residence. We have documentation of all repair requests, none of which were addressed by Mr. Blackwell's organization." Sterling jumped to his feet. "Objection. This child is clearly being coached. No 9-year-old could—" "Mr. Sterling," Judge Crenshaw interrupted, "the witness is presenting documented evidence. Your objection is noted but overruled." Malik's confidence grew with each successful exchange. "Your Honor, I believe the evidence clearly shows that Mr. Blackwell's lawsuit is based on pre-existing conditions that were his legal responsibility to remedy under the implied warranty of habitability." The legal precision of Malik's language was stunning. He wasn't just reciting memorized phrases. He was applying complex legal concepts with the skill of an experienced attorney. Blackwell himself was becoming visibly agitated, whispering urgently to his legal team. This wasn't going according to plan. The easy win against an unrepresented tenant was turning into a public relations nightmare. Sterling tried to regain control. "Your Honor, even if some problems existed previously, the extent of damage has clearly been exacerbated by tenant negligence." Malik was ready for this attack. "Mr. Sterling raises an excellent point about causation. That's exactly why I've prepared additional evidence that I believe will clarify the true timeline of events." He paused, looking directly at Judge Crenshaw with an expression that seemed far too knowing for a 9-year-old. "However, before presenting this evidence, I have serious concerns about potential conflicts of interest that may affect these proceedings. I request a brief recess to gather additional documentation that relates to judicial ethics and financial disclosure requirements." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Every lawyer present understood the implications of that statement. Malik wasn't just questioning the evidence, he was questioning the integrity of the court itself. Judge Crenshaw's face went pale, and Preston Blackwell looked like he had seen a ghost. They both knew exactly what this brilliant child had discovered, and they both realized that their carefully constructed system of corruption was about to be exposed by the smallest person in the room. "Recess granted," Crenshaw said weakly. "Court will resume in 30 minutes. As the gallery buzzed with excitement and confusion, Malik packed his briefcase with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. The first battle was over, and everyone in that courtroom knew that the 9-year-old boy had just outmaneuvered some of the most expensive lawyers in the state. The courthouse hallway exploded with tension during the 30-minute recess. News reporters surrounded anyone willing to talk, cameras capturing every moment of this unprecedented legal drama. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I must address concerns about conflicts of interest that may compromise these proceedings." Those words had hit the courtroom like lightning. Every lawyer understood their implications, but none more than Judge Crenshaw and Preston Blackwell, who now stood in hushed, urgent conversation near the side entrance. "What does that kid know?" Blackwell hissed, his arrogance replaced by panic. "How could a 9-year-old possibly—" "Shut up!" Crenshaw whispered harshly. "Not here." Social media was exploding with clips from the morning's proceedings. Number Little Lawyer was trending nationally, with thousands sharing videos of Malik's legal arguments and demanding justice against corrupt landlords. Preston Blackwell approached Malik directly, abandoning any pretense of working through lawyers. "Listen, kid," Blackwell said, his voice threatening. "You're playing with forces beyond your understanding. This isn't some game. This is the real world, where people who cross me get destroyed." Malik looked up without flinching. "Mr. Blackwell, are you attempting to intimidate a witness? Because that would constitute criminal obstruction of justice." Sarah appeared between them like a protective lioness. "Step away from my son." The confrontation drew courthouse security and reporters. Cameras captured the moment when one of the city's most powerful men was faced down by a working mother and her 9-year-old son. Other tenants from Blackwell's properties had gathered, inspired by Malik's courage. Mrs. Rodriguez clutched photos of dangerous stairs never repaired. Mr. Washington held heating complaints ignored for months. That man destroyed my family, Mrs. Rodriguez told a reporter. When I complained about mold making my daughter sick, he sued me for $15,000. Stories poured out like water through a broken dam. Families who had suffered in silence were finding their voices, inspired by a child who refused to be intimidated. Inside the courthouse bathroom, Malik and Sarah had a private moment. "Baby, I'm scared," Sarah admitted, hands shaking. "These are powerful people with everything to lose." Malik took his mother's hands, steadying them with startling maturity. "Mama, I found something that changes everything." Judge Crenshaw owns stock in Blackwell's company. He has financial interest in ruling against tenants. The game's been rigged from the beginning. Sarah's eyes widened. "If you're right, this destroys both of them, but it puts us in real danger." "I know, but if we don't fight, nothing changes. Other families keep suffering. Sometimes you risk everything to do what's right." Sarah saw not the child she was protecting, but the man he was becoming. Brilliant, courageous, committed to justice regardless of cost. "What do you need me to do?" "Trust me. When we go back, I'm exposing everything. It'll get ugly, but we're fighting for something bigger than us." As the recess ended, Malik straightened his oversized jacket. In his briefcase lay documents that could destroy careers and change hundreds of lives. The hallway emptied as people filed back toward courtroom 3B. The real battle was about to begin. "Ready, baby?" Sarah asked. "Ready, Mama. Let's go change the world." The courtroom fell silent as everyone returned from recess. The tension was so thick it seemed to press against the walls. Judge Crenshaw took his seat with obvious reluctance, his face pale and drawn. Preston Blackwell sat rigidly beside his lawyers, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool courtroom air. Malik stood at the defendant's table, his small frame dwarfed by the enormity of what he was about to unleash. In his hands, he held documents that would destroy everything these powerful men had built. "Your Honor," Malik began, his young voice carrying across the silent courtroom, "before we continue with the property damage claims, I must formally request your recusal from this case due to undisclosed financial conflicts of interest." The words hit like a bomb. The gallery gasped. Reporters leaned forward. Preston Blackwell's lead attorney shot to his feet. "Objection! This is outrageous." "Mr. Sterling," Judge Crenshaw interrupted, his voice strained. "The boy is addressing the court. Please be seated." Malik continued with devastating precision. "Your Honor, public records show that you own 500 shares of Blackwell Properties Incorporated, purchased through your retirement account in 2019. You also maintain membership at Pinehurst Country Club, where your annual dues of $12,000 are paid by the Montgomery County Landlords Association, an organization chaired by Mr. Preston Blackwell. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Reporters typed frantically. Blackwell's entire legal team looked like they had been struck by lightning. Furthermore, Malik pressed on, his voice growing stronger. Judicial ethics require disclosure of any financial interest that could influence your decisions. Your failure to recuse yourself from housing cases involving Mr. Blackwell's properties constitutes a violation of Canon 3 of the Judicial Code of Conduct. Judge Crenshaw's face had gone from pale to ashen. "Young man, these are very serious accusations." "They're not accusations, Your Honor. They're documented facts." Malik approached the bench with a folder thick with evidence. "I have stock ownership records, country club membership documents, and payment records from the Landlords Association, all obtained through public records requests." The legal precision was staggering. This 9-year-old boy was dismantling a corrupt system with the skill of a federal prosecutor. A new judge, the Honorable Patricia Williams, was called in for emergency replacement. Judge Williams was known throughout the county as incorruptible, fair-minded, and completely intolerant of judicial misconduct. "This court will now proceed under new leadership," Judge Williams announced. "Mr. Thompson, you may continue with your evidence." What happened next was a masterclass in legal warfare. Malik methodically destroyed every aspect of Blackwell's case, piece by devastating piece. "Mr. Blackwell," Malik said as the landlord took the witness stand, "you claim my mother caused $50,000 in property damage. Is that your testimony under oath?" "Yes, absolutely," Blackwell replied, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. Then could you explain why your own inspection reports, dated 3 months before my family moved into the apartment, document these exact same problems? Malik presented the smoking gun documents he had discovered in the law library. The inspection reports showed every crack, every water stain, every patch of mold that Blackwell was now claiming as tenant damage. Blackwell's confident expression crumbled. Those reports. That's not relevant to... Mr. Blackwell, you're under oath. These are your inspection reports, signed by your property manager, aren't they? Yes, but so you knowingly rented an apartment with dangerous, uninhabitable conditions to my family, then sued us for damages you knew we didn't cause? The trap was perfect. Blackwell was caught between admitting fraud or committing perjury on the witness stand. Malik wasn't finished. He presented evidence of Blackwell's systematic exploitation across all 200 properties. Insurance claims for tenant damage that matched pre-existing problems. Lawsuits against families for conditions that existed before they moved in. A pattern of criminal fraud that had destroyed hundreds of lives. Your Honor, Malik said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority, this isn't about one apartment or one family. This is about a criminal enterprise that has been stealing from working families for years, using the courts as a weapon to legitimize theft. Preston Blackwell was visibly shaking now. His expensive lawyers sat in stunned silence, unable to respond to the overwhelming evidence of their client's guilt. Mr. Blackwell, Malik continued, how many families have you sued using this same fraudulent scheme? I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights, the courtroom gasped. Preston Blackwell, one of the most powerful men in the county, was pleading the Fifth Amendment to avoid incriminating himself in front of a 9-year-old boy. Malik turned to face the gallery, packed with other victims of Blackwell's system. Your Honor, this case represents hundreds of families who have been systematically defrauded. I move that this court order a full investigation into Mr. Blackwell's business practices and refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Judge Williams looked at the evidence spread before her, then at the small boy who had exposed one of the largest housing fraud schemes in the county's history. Motion granted. This court finds clear evidence of systematic fraud and judicial corruption. Mr. Blackwell, you and your organization are hereby enjoined from filing any new eviction proceedings pending a full criminal investigation. The gallery erupted in applause. Families who had been victims for years were finally seeing justice. Malik had done what entire government agencies had failed to accomplish. He had stopped the machine of exploitation that had been destroying lives for decades. But Malik wasn't done. He had saved the most powerful moment for last. Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence. Malik's voice was quiet now, but it carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. My mama taught me that right is right and wrong is wrong, no matter how much money you have or how much power you think you possess. He looked directly at Preston Blackwell, the man who had tried to destroy his family. Mr. Blackwell, you picked the wrong family to steal from. Judge Williams raised her gavel, and the courtroom held its collective breath. The silence was complete. Every eye focused on the woman who would deliver justice. After reviewing the overwhelming evidence presented by young Mr. Thompson, Judge Williams began, this court finds in favor of the defendants on all counts. The courtroom exploded in jubilation. Families who had suffered under Blackwell's system leaped to their feet, tears streaming down their faces. The applause was deafening, rolling through the gallery like a wave of pure vindication. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, this court awards Sarah Thompson $500,000 in punitive damages for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of the implied warranty of habitability. Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief. $500,000 would change their lives forever. They could buy a real home and escape the cycle of poverty that had trapped them. Additionally, this court orders immediate investigation into all Blackwell properties. All pending eviction cases are suspended, pending fraud review. Preston Blackwell sat in stunned silence, his empire crumbling. The man who had terrorized hundreds of families now faced criminal prosecution and complete business destruction. Judge Williams turned to the man who had tried to destroy a 9-year-old's family. Mr. Blackwell, you will publicly apologize to Mrs. Thompson and her son for the fraud you perpetrated. Blackwell's lawyers whispered urgently, but the order was non-negotiable. Slowly, the millionaire stood and faced the family he had tried to crush. I apologize to Mrs. Thompson and her son for my actions, he mumbled. Louder, Mr. Blackwell, Judge Williams commanded, so everyone can hear your admission of guilt. Blackwell's face flushed with humiliation. I apologize to Sarah Thompson and Malik Thompson for fraudulently suing them for damages I knew they did not cause. The moment was electric. One of the county's most powerful men was bowing before a working mother and her 9-year-old son, forced to admit his crimes before hundreds of witnesses. Malik stood with quiet dignity, accepting the apology with impossible grace. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I hope you've learned about treating people with respect. Richard Sterling, the expensive lawyer who had mocked Malik initially, approached with obvious embarrassment. Young man, in 30 years of practice, I have never seen legal work of this caliber. You outmaneuvered my entire team with skill that would impress federal judges. The Bar Association would later grant Malik honorary recognition, making him the youngest person ever to receive such honor. But the real victory was happening in the gallery, where other families stepped forward with their stories. Mrs. Rodriguez found courage to file suit for mold that sickened her daughter. Mr. Washington organized tenants demanding heating repairs. Mrs. Lane contacted the district attorney about medical bills from dangerous conditions. Malik's movement was spreading beyond the courtroom, inspiring families countywide to demand their rights. As proceedings concluded, Malik and Sarah were surrounded by reporters. National networks called it the trial of the century, with legal scholars analyzing Malik's strategy. The most meaningful moment came when the courtroom emptied, leaving just mother and son together. Baby, I am so proud of you, Sarah whispered, pulling Malik into a fierce hug. You saved our family. You saved so many families. Malik looked up, his eyes bright with tears of relief. We did it together, Mama. You taught me that right is right and wrong is wrong. Everything I did came from what you taught me. Through courthouse windows, they saw families gathering outside with signs thanking Malik. Children separated by Blackwell's lawsuits were reunited. Elderly people forced into homelessness found new hope. That evening, Harvard Law School called with a full scholarship offer. Other universities followed. What do you want to do, baby? Sarah asked. Malik looked around their apartment. I want to keep fighting for families like ours, Mama. There are so many people who need someone to stand up for them. The boy who had been laughed at had become a symbol of hope for anyone told they didn't matter. 5 years later, Malik Thompson stands in Harvard Law School's library, the youngest student ever accepted. Sarah runs the Thompson Family Legal Advocacy Center, providing free legal help to families facing housing discrimination. Preston Blackwell's empire collapsed completely. Criminal investigations revealed fraud across all his properties, resulting in federal conviction and 12 years in prison. His buildings were redistributed to tenant-owned cooperatives, giving families homeownership security for the first time. Judge Crenshaw was forced into retirement, facing criminal charges for judicial corruption. The Thompson case led to housing court reforms nationwide, reuniting separated families and protecting vulnerable tenants. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter recovered from mold illness and studies medicine. Mr. Washington founded a tenants' rights organization helping hundreds of families. Mrs. Lane celebrated her 80th birthday in a safe, warm apartment. Malik's case became required reading in law schools, studied as proof that brilliant strategy could overcome systematic corruption. More importantly, it symbolized hope for anyone told they were too young, poor, or powerless to matter. People ask what it feels like to win, Malik tells visiting students. But the real victory was proving ordinary people have extraordinary power when they refuse to accept injustice. The boy laughed at how wearing oversized clothes had grown into his purpose. He discovered something life-changing. Everyone has the power to fight for what's right. Malik proved justice isn't about money or connections. It's about truth, courage, and refusing to accept that might make right. He showed that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. His story reminds us we all can be heroes in someone's story. We all have power to stand up for what's right, protect the vulnerable, and demand justice. What injustice in your community needs a voice? What system needs someone brave enough to challenge it? The next Malik Thompson might be watching this story right now. It might be you. The question isn't whether you have power to change the world. It's whether you have courage to try. Sometimes ordinary people do extraordinary things because they refuse to accept that things can't change. Malik proved justice is possible for everyone. If this story inspired you to believe in standing up for what's right, share it with someone who needs to remember their strength. Like if you believe truth and courage overcome any obstacle. Subscribe to Black Tales Stories for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That hero might be you.